See today's breaking news stories first on Channel 5 News. Get the real news at 5. The Channel 5 News 5 o'clock report. Channel 5's Pam Dale, keeping you in touch.
So Arthur Ashe wins and provides, without doubt, one of the greatest upsets in the long history of Wimbledon.
Arthur Ashe, former Wimbledon champion. Today he announced he has AIDS. A public figure fighting a private battle.
Jeannie and I and some close friends have often talked about how long we could conceal this secret.
Today he felt compelled to disclose it to the world. Tonight, a conversation with Arthur Ashe.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
For all the times that you may have envied an incredibly gifted athlete, for all the times that you have wished yourself in the place of someone very famous, for all those times, remember today and the case of Arthur Ashe and his family. As of today, Ashe, the tennis champion and teacher, Ashe, the human rights activist, Ashe, the historian and chronicler of black athletes, must compete for attention in the public's mind with Arthur Ashe, who has AIDS. No matter that his millions of fans and admirers have nothing but compassion for him and his family, what Arthur Ashe, the private man, the family man, has been obliged to surrender to the imperatives of fame is, quite plain and simply, his privacy when he most needs and wants it. That has been a bitter pill for him to swallow. But as with everything else that he has done in public, Arthur Ashe handled it today with dignity and grace. More now from Dave Marash.
People, I think, are jolted and are surprised in a profound way when anyone who is famous, anyone who one would not associate with this disease, becomes diagnosed with AIDS.
AIDS clinic administrator Jim Graham made that observation 5 months ago when basketball star Magic Johnson announced he had tested positive for the HIV virus. It's just as true today for an America jolted by the news from tennis great Arthur Ashe, who went public today even though he says he's not sick and he and his family had wanted to keep his condition private. But
sometime last week, someone phoned USA Today and told the paper. After several days of checking it out, USA Today decided to confront me with the rumors. It put me in the unenviable position of having to lie if I wanted to protect our privacy. No one should have to make that choice.
It's news when a public person of his stature has an illness.
USA Today sports editor Gene Polichinski was the man who put that hard choice to Arthur Ashe.
If he has a heart attack, if he had fatal cancer, whatever that illness might be, the fact that it's AIDS at USA Today does not create a special zone of privacy or treatment.
To George Swales of Washington's Whitman-Walker Clinic, Polichinski's reasoning is naive. He notes Ashe's past health problems and says,
Arthur Ashe's heart difficulties and his open heart surgery were news, but they were not stigmatizing. Arthur Ashe's brain surgery was news. It is not stigmatizing. He did not lose his revenue-gaining ability because of a stigma attached to those things. That is a key difference that I think we need to focus on.
We talked about his illness, we talked about his life, we talked about what he wanted to do.
George Salamon of the Washington Post found himself in the same painful place Gene Polichinski was in this week, back in 1986, with one of his town's most popular athletes, one-time Redskin tight end Jerry Smith. Together, they made Smith the first professional athlete publicly to state he had AIDS.
It reached a point where, finally, when you're a newspaper guy, you say, I'd like to get this in the newspaper. And he said, I think you should.
Much has changed in the 5.5 years since Jerry Smith went public, but not the fear people with AIDS share.
The quality of one's life changes irrevocably when something like this becomes public. Reason and rational thought are too often waved out of fear, out of caution, or out of just plain ignorance. My family and I must now learn a new set of behavioral standards to function in the everyday world.
Every time a new name is added to this list of people with AIDS, the suggestion is made maybe Rock Hudson, or Liberace, or Max Robinson, or Magic Johnson can make this fear obsolete. But full-time AIDS activists insist it isn't.
Arthur Ashe now is going to meet up with what a lot of people who are HIV positive have met up with. He will unfortunately be chastised for it. There will be people that will think that he should not maybe be in the restaurant eating where they are.
Maybe this time things will be different. After all, Magic Johnson did change a lot of attitudes.
In young, athletic, in-your-face kind of street basketball kinds of males who somehow view themselves as being the same as Magic Johnson also can now view themselves as being vulnerable. I hear a dialogue that is different between them.
When he announced his illness, Magic Johnson spoke his intimate worry.
I miss the battles and the wars, but most of all what I miss is the camaraderie that I had with the guys, being one of the fellas.
Months after he'd left the Lakers locker room, Magic Johnson returned for the NBA All-Star Game. In true magical fashion, he starred, and he and his fellow players proved the camaraderie survived. He is still one of the fellas.
Magic has been almost like a pathfinder for Arthur in a nice way.
Donald Dell is one of Arthur Ashe's best friends. He's represented Ashe on a handshake agreement for Ashe's entire tennis career. But Dell says Magic Johnson's important message goes only part of the way for Ashe.
What really troubles him is how his daughter and his wife are going to be treated in the public. He's very worried about his 5-year-old daughter, Camera, and what the public at the school kids might be saying to her, and he's very troubled by the Ryan White existence and situation in the school. So he's very protective, and I think the biggest single reason he never wanted to go public with this was his wife and children, his wife and daughter.
If Magic Johnson eloquently told us, "I've got AIDS, but I'm all right," Arthur Ashe can bear a broader message. I've got AIDS, but we, my wife, my child, and perhaps even my public, we're all right. People who know him say if anyone in the world can communicate this triumph over tragedy, Arthur Ashe is the man. I'm Dave Marash for Nightline in Washington.
We'll begin our conversation with Arthur Ashe in a moment.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Charles Schwab.
Everyone has a dream, a vision deep inside.
With all the mutual funds out there, I needed an easy way to help me compare them.
We make it easier to follow your own lead.
With Schwab's free mutual funds performance guide, I can compare track records on over 500 funds.
Always there to give you just the help you need.
Help yourself at Schwab today.
I'm not going to buy just any tire.
Before you buy new tires, test these first. Bridgestone Road Handlers from Sears. Drive them anywhere for 1,000 miles. If you're not convinced Bridgestone Road Handlers are the best tires you've ever driven, Sears will replace them free.
When they say it's guaranteed, it's guaranteed.
Now at reduced prices. Bridgestone Road Handler, backed by Sears lifetime free replacement.
Who's going to back you better than Sears?
I was doing the system installation the other day, and there was this little kid. He said, "What's that?" Tell him it's a water conditioner for cleaner clothes. Later, I'm installing a drinking water system, and the kid says,
"What you doing under the sink, old man?"
I tell him I'm making his water taste better.
Cool.
Cool.
Now you can try 3 months of Culligan drinking water or 3 months of Culligan soft water for just $9.99 a month. Or for an extra penny, you can try them both.
It's tax time. You have to pay, so why do some Japanese corporations get away with paying next to nothing? How do they do it? On Prime Time Thursday.
It was only hours ago that Arthur Ashe reluctantly and with some anger told the world that he has AIDS. He joins us now from our studios in New York. A few hours ago, you told Tom Brokaw that you had sort of put off the most difficult part of this, and that is a conversation you were going to have with your daughter, and that you were going to do that this evening. Have you done it?
No. It's been very difficult. She's just 5 years old. We would be trying to tell her only what we think she could understand. She is in a very, very understanding school environment. The school has already moved to help alleviate that problem, as well as educate and further teach the students who are already there. So we feel confident that tomorrow, the first day of the rest of our lives, will be a very interesting day, and we're going to break the news to camera gradually.
Maybe you can tell and teach all of us something by giving us a sense of what it is you want to say to your daughter.
I need to tell her that just as people come up to Daddy on the street and say hi, and they're total strangers, some who may want to start conversations and talk a while, she has begun to accept the fact that that is what will happen when she goes out for a walk with Daddy in the street. But that one day Daddy may get sick, and she knows what happens to some people if they get sick. She understands the concept of death. She understands it very well. There have been several relatives, my father, some others who have died that she knew fairly well, still knows their names. But one of the problems is camera's sense of being able to grasp time intervals. If I were to say something's going to happen in 2 months, she may come back and say, Daddy, how long is that? So how else can you more fully explain 2 months? So basically it's a matter of my wife and myself, the two of us trying to find the right words, and just enough words to tell her just enough so that she can grasp what we're telling her.
You have known now for what, almost 4 years?
Yes, it'll be 4 years this September, '92.
So you've known for almost 4 years that you have AIDS. You've known for a few days that this was something, whether you wanted to or not, that was going to be shared with the public. Can you give me a sense of what the difference is between simply living with the knowledge of AIDS and living with the knowledge that you not only have AIDS, but that everyone else is going to know about it?
Well, certainly now that the press conference today at HBO is finished, my wife and I feel a heightened sense of relief that we don't have to, I don't want to use the word hide it. We don't have to act in a way that would mask the secret that we had shared by just a few people. But again, as I mentioned, the biggest problem is, for me, adjusting to the loss of control, the loss of some freedoms to pursue things that I wanted to pursue. Now I will be forced to have to deal with some things that I don't necessarily want to deal with, possibly in the time frame that others want me to deal with it in. But I'll just have to learn how to adjust to that.
Are you talking, among other things, Arthur, about being obliged to play once again role model?
Yes. In the 60s, being a black athlete in the middle of the black social revolution, you were obliged to get involved in that issue. And obviously there was a terrific willingness to do that. In the 70s, those things that you feel obliged to get involved with may have changed. But certainly now, all along, even before I went public, I knew that when I finally did make it public, I would get involved in some way with the AIDS crisis, just as I got involved in a very large sense with heart disease in the early 80s. For 2 years, I was national campaign chairman for the American Heart Association, and I did that willingly. So it's not something that I would shun. And when I choose the time and the place to get involved with AIDS, I will also do that willingly.
But it's just an extra burden at a time when you have more than enough of your own.
Yes. Since the day I found out in September of '88, what circumscribes and proscribes what I can do more than anything else is this feeling that I don't have much time. And I've got to try to squeeze whatever I want to do into a smaller period of time. And who wants to do that? It's difficult to make plans.
Do you know how much time you have, roughly?
No, I don't. But again,
do you want to? I mean, if a doctor could tell you, do you want to know?
I went over that today. The doctor really couldn't tell me because I assumed 3.5 years ago that I wouldn't be here now. But not only am I here now, I'm doing very well, as people can see, and as people saw Magic Johnson doing very well. That's obviously one of the things I would like to convey to people who are watching me, and I hope that I can be helpful in that respect, in the sense that, yes, I have AIDS, as opposed to Magic Johnson, who is just HIV positive. But you can look at me, and you can listen to me, and you can see me. I am not sick.
But you are having trouble with your earpiece,
Yeah.
so let's take a break, and we'll be back.
We'll fix that. Thank
We'll
you.
be back with Arthur Ashe in just a moment.
Terry is impressed with the ease of Microsoft Word for Windows. But more importantly, the office is impressed with Terry. Microsoft Word, the word processor for Windows. We'd like to point out that for 10 million people, Microsoft Windows is an easier way to use their PCs. We'd now like to point out how easy it is to see for yourself. Just call 1-800-882-2000.
This is regular. This is better. This Bayer is regular. For headaches, Anacin is better. Why better? Regular Bayer has one ingredient. Anacin has two. A pain medicine plus a second ingredient that makes it work better. Get Anacin. Get better.
Making your place look great should be fun and save you money. To do it right the first time, just ask Ace.
This 4 cubic foot wheelbarrow is only $19.99. An Ace lawn rake or round point shovel, just $5.99 each.
Ace Best Buy is another reason Ace is the place for you.
Hi, dear. Catching the commuter flight at 5. I know some people like fancy cars, have expensive hobbies, but for us, it's our home that counts. The things we buy for it, furnishings, things we like to live with. That's what's important to us. Some people don't know what they're missing.
At Redekers, we'll help you make your home into a place you love to spend time in. Redekers and Boone, furnishing homes for those who care for well over 60 years.
It's good to be home.
He's the tough cop that's seen the worst of violent crime. Now he teaches simple tricks that can save you from being a victim.
The money goes this way, and I go this way.
Primetime Thursday.
And now we continue our conversation with Arthur Ashe.
Arthur, as I think you know, a great many people in the public still put AIDS patients into two general categories, those who got AIDS with blame and AIDS without blame. You would appear to fall into the AIDS without blame category, but should that make any difference?
It really shouldn't. The disease can strike indiscriminately if transmitted effectively. And one of the things we really need to get away from is a moral judgment that somehow AIDS is God's retribution or revenge on a sinful society, or God is selecting out a certain group of people for retribution. That we should get away with. And as was asked to me today in the press conference, whether or not I thought the government was a bit slow reacting to it in the beginning, before I even knew I was HIV positive or had AIDS, I thought that that was indeed the case, that with the evidence that the medical community seemed to have early in this crisis, it seemed by their own standards they should have moved a lot more quickly. But certainly I think with the groups like Gay Men's Health Crisis, ACT UP, the President's Council on AIDS, and other groups who are very involved with this, I think that feeling is lessening every day, that there is a good way to get it and a bad way to get it.
I gather that that the president called you today. The president is a very gracious man who shows these courtesies to people quite often, and I don't mean to suggest anything untoward in the call, but just as with Magic Johnson, there is always the possibility that you can be used for political reasons. I don't in this case mean Republican versus Democrat, but I mean it is a way of making the administration sometimes appear to be doing more than it actually is by acquiring a few famous people who associate their names then with the White House. Do you have any fear about being drawn into that kind of thing?
No, not really. And certainly the word used is to be taken just as I think you mean it, in a sense of some form of exploitation for ulterior motives, obviously this being an election year. No, specifically, I've known George Bush for 25 years, and I specifically alerted Secretary Sullivan's chief of staff, who's a friend, to alert Barbara Bush to tell President Bush about this, because I didn't want him to hear it from some other source. I don't think he's doing it for that reason. I think he would have called in any case. But certainly, when and if the time comes, or when it does come, I will certainly make myself available to do whatever the AIDS establishment thinks that I can help best in this matter.
In Dave Marash's setup report, we heard a couple of people talk about the negative consequences of people discovering that you have AIDS and the sort of impact that that begins to have on an AIDS patient's life. Have you even begun to experience that yet?
Yes, I gained a lot of insight in reading Susan Sontag's book, Illness as Metaphor, and then a follow-up book, AIDS as Metaphor. In the first book, Illness as Metaphor, she talked about how cancer and tuberculosis early in this century had negative connotations, but quite different, attributed to them and by association to the people who had these diseases. The same thing has happened to people who have AIDS. As the gentleman mentioned, one difference that maybe Gene Polichinski at USA Today may not have wanted to make, and I am by no means blaming them because they are just doing what everybody else does, is that AIDS is stigmatizing, as Susan Sontag mentioned. And whereas my heart bypass operation is not stigmatizing, my brain infection was not stigmatizing, but this necessarily, permanently, irrevocably takes away a great degree of my privacy from me and my family.
Not only your privacy, but I think the implication, Arthur, was that it may take away your earning capability, that whatever it is you were doing before, people may be less inclined to pay you for it now. And that's really what I meant when I asked you a moment ago whether you have experienced any of that yet.
No. That may or may not have every indication now, as obviously most people hear from their commercial associations early in an announcement period like this, that things will be okay, but certainly the relationship has to change. That's human nature, but with each revelation that comes out, like a Magic Johnson, like Ryan White, like Freddie Mercury, or whatever it is, each time the public is educated a bit more, and I think there is a bit less hysteria and a bit more realism about what the true nature is.
All right, we're going to take another break. When we come back, I'd like to spend our last couple of minutes together talking about privacy and the degree to which the loss of it is perhaps inevitable. Back in a moment.
How bad are your allergies?
Terrible.
Terrible allergy attack?
I feel like I just want to unscrew my head, take it off.
Suppose I took your Benadryl away.
I'd be home in bed.
Would you try this new allergy medicine?
Does it work the same?
Dristan Allergy has a decongestant, and this Benadryl doesn't. So it relieves nasal congestion and pressure Benadryl can't. Let's try it.
Okay. I feel fantastic.
Why?
I can breathe through my nose. I don't need a tissue anymore.
New Dristan Allergy. Dristan, the face of relief today.
These slip down one more time. I'm fed up with glasses that don't fit.
You don't have to put up with glasses that don't fit anymore. Because at LensCrafters, we have so many new ways to make glasses more comfortable.
LensCrafters glasses fit your snug points with features like new snug fit hinges that hug your head and won't lose their gentle hold. LensCrafters, for that cushion of comfort you've always wanted.
I never knew glasses could be this comfortable.
Lens Crafters, better fit for greater comfort in about an hour.
Clear. Test area.
Tests prove Rockport dress shoes absorb shock significantly better than ordinary dress shoes. Rockport, you should be in our shoes.
It's a tractor value like no other. For only $999.99, get this Craftsman tool 12.5 horsepower tractor with 38-inch deck. Save $250 during Sears Days. It's a spectacular value above the rest.
When news breaks, you'll see it first on the Channel 5 News 5 o'clock report. Channel 5's Metro News team will take you live to the scene, providing on-the-spot coverage. At 5 o'clock, only Channel 5 saves you money with exclusive consumer reports. And only Channel 5 offers Weather School, our innovative cooperative education program. Add Pam Dale's accurate weather forecasts and Keith Murphy's unique look at sports, and you've got a newscast guaranteed to keep you in touch. The Channel 5 News 5 o'clock report.
You know what's really great about doing this show? The fact that you tune in every single day. Did anybody ever say thanks? Thanks.
Arthur, from what I've read about the way that USA Today handled the story, it seems to me that they did it in a thoroughly professional and even honorable way. Do you agree?
I completely agree. I talked with, obviously, the reporter, Doug Smith, who was a good friend of mine, and later talked with Mr. Polichinski. And we basically were just going around and around, sort of semantic dancing, as it were. But for whatever reason that they decided not to go with it this morning, I was grateful, and I thanked them publicly for that.
Why were you so upset? You used the term, as I recall, whoever it was that ratted on you. Why were you so upset at whoever it is who...
Well, first of all, I think it's human nature that anyone would be upset if somebody unilaterally, voluntarily just called up the news media and said, hey, I've got a story for you. Obviously, I will never find this person's name out. I doubt that. But I also understand the way the news business works, having been around ABC and HBO myself. And I was more upset specifically that in order to protect my privacy, I had to lie about it, if I wanted to do so. And I decided, after talking to Jeannie ad nauseum about it, that I didn't want to lie, and that it would be better for me now than to just go public than to tell one lie and have to make it up later down the road.
All right, Arthur, thank you very much. This was a night when we asked you to come on, and you came. If at any time in the near future you decide you want to come on, we owe you one.
Thank you.
That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been Nightline.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Thursday, Colombo enters the shadowy world of covert operations.
What exactly is the Special Projects Fund?
Secret guns for secret friends.
We now know that Mr. Keegan was murdered. You murdered the man.
Colombo, Grand Deceptions, Thursday.
In and out clouds overnight with a low in the 40s.